Hey guys, what is going on? Chris here with Shughead Gaming, bringing you my review for Beat Blaster, developed by Ivanovich Games. And while this is currently available on various VR platforms, this review will of course be on the PSVR version and reviewed on the PS4 Pro. Beat Blaster releases April 5th, 2019 for an estimated price of $20. Of course, that depends on your region. Beat Blaster is a VR game about shooting and running, where everything happens to the beat of the music. The music rhythm genre is hot in VR right now, and Beat Blasters looks to cash in on this. But does this scratch the itch? Let's find out. As always guys, if you like this video, please hit that like button, and if you'd like to see more PSVR content from me, please consider subscribing, and for video updates, hit that bell icon. And remember, if you want more PSVR news and info, check Shughead Gaming out on Twitter and Facebook. Let's kick things off with a look at graphics. If you played Ivanovich Games' previous PSVR title, Operation Warcade, then you know that they haven't previously delivered stellar-looking games to PSVR, with Warcade's port to PSVR falling far short of the original PC VR version. Unfortunately, Beat Blaster suffers a similar fate, coming off much less polished and with jagged edges, much more prevalent than the simple visuals would leave you expecting. Fortunately, this is mostly evident in the starting menu area, and when in movement becomes much less of an issue. Like Operation Warcade before it, Beat Blaster's visual style is hugely inspired by retro arcade games, with the overall feel and quality of the game coming off much more retro Galaga or the recent Polybius for PSVR, and less Beat Saber. Textures in the levels are practically non-existent, with most objects rendered with only a few flat colors and simple shaders. Like I said, Beat Blaster screams retro arcade, complete with retro pastel colors, so if living inside a giant 80s arcade game appeals to you, these visuals will likely satisfy. Personally, I found the overall visuals came off rather bland and slightly unpolished, and not helped much by the repetitive level design repeated across all 30 levels. Guns in the game actually look pretty decent up close, but again, we get the same guns throughout the whole game with no variation in either appearance or firing effects. This lack of variation and the poor particle effects that accompany the gunplay might play well into the whole retro vibe, but for me, it just felt undercooked. Sound is up next.
Awesome. Cool.
Straight off, with a game like Beat Blaster, it's obvious Ivanovich Games wants to channel in on the Beat Saber craze and bring to the VR market their own brand of beat-heavy dance tunes to game to. You won't find anywhere near the quality or variety of music here in Beat Blaster as you found in Beat Saber, so go in with your expectations in check. If this genre is to your liking, you will likely find yourself bobbing your head to the beat, but the generic quality across the 30 songs on offer here will most likely ensure you forget each song by the next level. Music selection in Beat Blaster spans a few subgenres of EDM, but rarely strays too far from its core sound. Music in Beat Blasters is actually not a key gameplay mechanic, so it's less of an issue that it's more background music. Outside of music being slowed down when you slow to a crawl in the game, music is never affected by gameplay in any meaningful way. Other sound effects, from the sound of your guns to the commentator, all come off incredibly retro arcade. Again, likely satisfying those appreciating the retro throwback, but ultimately for me, coming off pretty tame. The commentator's soundbites in particular, sounding like they were ripped right out of Operation Warcade, became increasingly monotonous, with sayings like "Unstoppable," feeling random and repetitive. Overall, the pumping EDM soundtrack did at times line up nicely with gameplay moments, but it simply lacked the pulse-pounding and memorable music to help elevate this slightly generic-sounding retro shooter to something a little more special. And that brings us to gameplay. If you haven't figured it out yet, let me be clear, Beat Saber, this is not. The recently released PC VR title, Audica, is Beat Saber with guns, and will eventually be coming to PSVR. But, in the meantime, Beat Blaster is neither of those games. Instead, Beat Blaster is a VR runner shooter, where you must survive to the end of a given level, getting there as fast as you can while racking up as many points as possible, either shooting enemies or targets. Beat Blaster consists of 30 levels, each with its own unique song. Upon each death, you start over, but the current level is procedurally generated, so you can forget memorizing rooms and enemy placements. Instead, each additional level adds a new element to deal with, ranging from shielded turrets, switch-activated doors, and giant cutting lasers, eventually turning Beat Blaster into an almost bullet hell shooter by the halfway point. Like the retro arcade games that inspired it, Beat Blaster is not an easy game and you will die, and die a lot. Respawns are almost instant and guns have unlimited ammo, so if Beat Blaster gets its hooks in you, expect to get obsessed with the one more try nature of each level. Like I previously mentioned, Beat Blaster is not a music rhythm game. Levels pulse to the beat, and yes, playing the game at a faster pace is definitely encouraged in the gameplay and the music, but music is not a gameplay mechanic in any meaningful way, not impacting your score in the slightest. As for control options, there are many. Beat Blaster can be controlled with either a DS4, 1 or 2 moves, and the much appreciated option of aim support. In addition, 3D rudder support is also available when it finally launches in May of this year. Ignoring the optional 3D rudder for a minute, every control method I mentioned has left and right movement as well as speed control assigned to head tracking. Regardless of controller, this setup did take some time as movement was pretty sensitive, but eventually I dialed it in and found it to be very responsive. Aim support was of course neat, but with no analog movement, 2 move controllers were my controller of choice, as dual wielding had its obvious benefits. While head movement linked to movement worked just fine, it also had the inherent problem of not allowing me to really look around the 3D world or shoot at targets behind me. This is where the 3D rudder comes into play. While I don't yet have my 3D rudder to try it out for this review, I can definitely see this with 2 move controllers being my controller options of choice. Tracking was spot on across the board, and Beat Blasters performed well either sitting or standing, with a moderate amount of room recommended for freedom when shooting. Motion sickness could affect some with Beat Blaster. You never actually turn in the game, but the sheer speed of the gameplay and the lack of blinders could affect some. And finally, that brings us to fun factor in my final review. Beat Blaster can be an addictive and difficult shooter in the style of retro shooters of old. This style of shoot, die, repeat really isn't what I look for in modern VR games, but for those who do, and especially those who love to dominate the leaderboards, this still comes off as a competent arcade shooter with fairly polished gameplay. I hate number ratings and instead rate games on the basis of buy, wait for a sale, or burn it to the ground. I think after watching this, you will probably know if this is your type of game or not. This isn't a pretty or impressive VR experience, so the $20 price tag really makes this a buy only for those who this really appeals to. For all others, this could be a fun little experience, but it's likely better left for sale. Anyways guys, that's it for me. If you like this video, please hit that like button. And if you'd like to see more PSVR content from me, please consider subscribing. And for video updates, hit that bell icon. I'll catch you guys on my next video.